Hey guys, happy NAMO. We totally forgot. We totally spaced. I have no idea how.
No, we thought it was this Wednesday.
Natalie even complained to me about it being Wednesday because she's leaving for camp on Thursday and she's like, you wouldn't reschedule it for me to go to camp. And I was like, oh, I guess I wouldn't reschedule it. And she forgot that we rescheduled it for her. So you have to take that criticism back. Yeah, we did reschedule.
We did, thank you.
So we're a little light on questions this month. So if you have questions, make sure to post them in the comments so that we can see them. We're going to answer the couple questions we have. They're kind of bigger questions, so that's easy. We might throw in a couple of rants. We might talk about some of the things that are coming up. One thing I will praise you on is that I had the meeting with Sue. I interviewed her. I asked her a bunch of really interesting questions, turned into a great interview, and that file got corrupted, and it's been fixed now, but the audio and the video are out of sync. So I might end up just publishing audio-only version of the interview. There will be a section that's missing because that got corrupted beyond repair. But if I can get it synced up to the video, then you will see that whole video.
So you should expect that in the next week or something?
You should expect it next month.
Okay.
Next month at some point. I'm hoping to fix the video, but if not, I'll just release that. I've got a whole bunch of stuff planned. I've got lots of slideshows, and right now I'm collecting video. I'm going to try to release video lessons on the 3 basic mechanical skills of nosework, what I consider the 3 basic mechanical skills. We're going to release several games coming up, but again, I'm just collecting video. That's all I need for those games. And maybe we'll put it out there to some of you trainers on Patreon to collect video for us, because the last game I posted, we had some wonderful video caught by another trainer. So maybe I'll, if you're interested in doing these games and, you know, sending the videos into me so that I can use them, then let me know. That would be awesome.
And if you have some interesting variations, they could go in the variation section.
Absolutely, yeah. Do you have anything to talk about the book club?
Not much. I'm working on my sort of final post for Fred Helfer's book, but it probably won't go up before I get back from Pennsylvania camp. So it'll be probably second week of September or something like that. And then we'll move on to the next book, finally.
Yep.
And yeah, I think that's all.
Yep.
If anyone, you know, hasn't gotten into the book and wants to, you know, feel free. It's not that dense of a book. I mean, it's a little long, but it's a lot of pictures and diagrams and things like that. And you could certainly catch up and go back and look at the posts we've had on the book. And
have you decided on a next book?
Well, I was thinking of doing the other book that people wanted to do when we started, which is Sent to the Missing.
Yeah.
But if anyone else has a book that they're just dying to read, you know, I'd consider that. Because I wouldn't mind more books that are like more training oriented than novel oriented, but I mean, novel is fine as well. The discussion will just probably end up being a little different.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, like we said, we've only got a couple questions this month. It's going to be a shorter episode. If you've got questions that are burning on your mind, make sure to send them to us. We are still collecting video as well for the video review marathon. So if you've got a video, make sure to let us know. Hi, Brian and Judy. Nice to see you. Let's start with a rant.
Okay.
So I want to talk about this fact that's really important for people to understand, that competition is always bad for your dog. Every single time. Okay. And let me define exactly what I mean about that, because obviously, you know, I'm very competitive. I love competing. I like doing all that stuff. But what I mean by that is that every single time you compete, you are taking away from your dog's foundation in your training. There's no exception. There's no way to avoid this problem. Your timing's off. Your emotional state isn't 100% where it needs to be. You're not able to respond to your dog with what they necessarily need in the moment, because we're competing. We're not going to step in and help you when your dog's struggling, or if you're going to call a false alert and you normally do blind with help, no one's saving you from that. You're going to make your mistakes.
And you have no idea where you're rewarding,
nope.
You know, relative
how close
to
the odor, or
how close your dog even got, because people tend to assume that their dog sourced it completely. And a lot of the times they didn't.
Yeah.
But you have no way to know that in the moment.
So I know a lot of people in nosework who basically their training is competing. They basically go from competition to competition with very little training in between. And the training in between they do is essentially just more competition. They just do blind searches that are set up to be approximating a trial search, which I think is like the worst thing you can do. You should train to trial, not trial, and that is your training, right? So that's one of the reasons I don't believe in doing a lot of blind searches. You'll hear in the conversation I have with Sue, she really is an advocate for doing lots of blind searches. I have caveats to that. I think there is an important need for a certain amount of blind searches in certain positions, but I think for me, blind searches are not training. That's what you're training for, is to go and do those things.
Right. Whenever it is, it's testing.
Yeah. And that's not to say there isn't learning that happens there, right? I go out on the ranch with my dog to do some herding, and we lose a cow. We learned a lot, and we lost a freaking cow, right? And that happens. I don't know if now we've never told this story to anybody but friends, but when I first brought sheep home, for the very first time, we brought home, I think, 5 sheep. And I took them out, I was working them, and we lost a sheep. I spent 4 hours scouring the desert for the sheep. We never found it.
Outright disappeared. Walked behind a bush and
never saw it again. Okay.
Bizarre.
That was a learning experience for me. I learned a lot about sheep herding, and it helped me with my handling and my training from then on. But that's not a training exercise, a good training exercise. That's good learning. It's painful learning to happen, and that kind of painful learning happens in nose work. You're going to learn how to read your dog better by doing blind searches, by making errors.
Yeah, and I think there are ways to meet in the middle a little as well with coach blind and blind.
Well, and I'm not saying don't do blind searches, but don't trick yourself into thinking that
that's how you're training your dog.
Yeah, exactly, and that there aren't bad consequences that come with doing all of these blind searches. So I do in my training mostly drills. I almost never do blind searches. I got a bunch of great blind searches that you're going to see of what I did with Lumi and Catfish earlier today. We went to Tractor Supply and did blind searches there. They're on food though. And one thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately is how to structure blind searches for my students for learning, because there is important learning to happen in blind searches. And I think the solution is to do all your blind searching on food. And then when you go to odor, you're already good at reading your dog. And so when you go on odor, you can focus on drilling and doing the fun stuff, competing in games and things like that, murder mysteries. But if you're still learning how to read your dog when you go on odor, then that's a challenge, I think.
Yeah. I also think
it's something I've been experimenting with. So, yeah.
Careful about, like with AKC trials. So if you're in Southern California and you have probably multiple AKC trials you could do a month, and maybe 1 to 2 NACSW trials you could do a month, depending on the month. And so you could be trialing a lot. You could be trialing probably 3 weeks a month if you really want to, maybe, depending on the month, 2 to 3 weeks a month. And so you really have to spend the time going back and, filling in all of the holes you're punching in your foundation when you're competing that often. And it's important to just be aware of that so that you can fill in those cracks before they become genuine problems. Because they will if you're not careful.
Yeah. A very common metaphor people like to use is the bank account metaphor. So when you're training, you're depositing money into your bank account. And when you're trialing, you're withdrawing money from that bank account. And what you're hoping is that you've deposited enough money that you don't overdraw your account in trial, which that overdraw happens all the time. You false alert, you miss the hide, whatever happens, right? That's when you overdraw your account. You didn't have as much in the bank as you thought you did, and your dog wasn't able to cope with it. So hello, a few more people have joined us. I can see that. Leave a comment. Let us know you're here. We're going to start answering questions soon. We've only got a couple questions, so if you've got questions, post them, and that'll keep this episode going a little bit longer if you want. So that's the first rant. I think we'll do a question or 2 questions, then we'll do another rant.
Sounds good.
We'll see how far that takes us.
Questions and comments on the rant are welcome as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so this question is, I often have several classes running back to back, so I use the same theme for all of them, adjusting for level if necessary. I recently did a class where the dogs were doing vehicle searches, and the first search was blank. After that search, I put out odor in tins. When the next class started, I wanted to start with a blank search. Some of the dogs recognized where the odor had been, but had been removed, and I had wiped the area. One of the students when her dog was indicating on a spot where odor had been, expressed her objection to the blank exercise because she said her dog was responding to odor, and she rewarded her dog. Do these types of exercises create confusion in the dogs? What is the best way to deal with lingering odor in these circumstances? We want to train for blank searches, but lingering odor and back-to-back classes make truly blank areas almost an impossibility. Yeah, I agree with that, especially if you're reusing the same training areas over and over again, like you said. I think that blank searches are most valuable in new locations where you've never set odor before and ideally has never odor been set before, right? And again, I use blank searches diagnostically to see what the dogs are doing. Are they missing certain areas? Are they over-checking certain areas? Are they going high? Are they going low? Are they skipping past the threshold? What are they doing, right, when there's no odor present? If I don't know what they do when there's no odor present, then I don't know what hides to set, and I'm just setting hides blind. I'm just setting hides where I think they would be interesting instead of where the dog needs them. So the idea of a truly blank search, the other thing about a truly blank search is you're talking about odor only. No search is blank to the dog. There's always things to the dog that are interesting and not interesting. It's not a blank search to them. It's very vivid, right? It's very interesting. I think when we think of a blank search in our head, we think of like a blank sheet of paper.
And then a room with odor would have a couple splashes of color on it.
Yeah, but that's not what it's like to the dog. It's like a tie-dyed colored paper, and then the odor is a little tiny mark on that paper somewhere, you know? Now, the other question is, do these types of exercises create confusion in the dogs? No, they don't.
Done correctly.
Even done incorrectly, they don't create confusion in the dog.
Well, I think rewarding on lingering odor could create
That's not the
confusion
search.
in the dog.
That's the handler's actions.
Yes.
So handlers create confused dogs, and being confused as a handler will confuse the dogs. I've seen dogs learn some amazing things that are way convoluted. A really easy example of this is you go to the average pet home. Let's say there's 5 people in that household, and every single one of them gives a different sit command, and the dog's figured it out, right? He knows everyone's sit command. He responds to it perfectly for all of them. That's a situation which should confuse the crap out of the dog. But because it makes sense to each person in their own head, the dog figures it out. If a handler is confused, the dog will be confused. If the handler is certain about something, even something that's wrong, it's going to work. It's like confidence is obnoxious in that it works, right? So what you're noticing there is the handler was confused. Now, in terms of confusion to the dogs, think of it from the dog's perspective. You're a dog in a search, okay? And you go and you smell some lingering or residual odor or whatever you want to call it, right? Some molecules of odor that are there, right? What's confusing about that to the dog? The dog's saying, oh, a certain concentration of odor. Maybe my owner wants to know about this. This is perfectly logical assumption from the dog. There's nothing confusing about that. The handler is confused about what they should do. Do I reward the dog? Do I not reward the dog? And it's up to us as trainers to decide what's a rewardable moment for the dog. And for me, the residual's never rewardable. I'm not going to reward you for that ever, because that's going to create problems later down the line, because it's very, very similar to pooling odor, right? Think about it this way. Let's imagine that hide is on the other side of the car blowing through, right? Now, granted, that odor makes a different odor pattern to the dog, potentially. But let's say that dog hits the same area, but now there's a little bit of odor pooling in that other side of the car. What should your dog do with that pooling odor? Should they alert on it? Should they not alert on it? What should the handler do? Should they pay them? Should they make them work to source? It's up to us, right? We get to decide what the dog does. What's confusing is that we have different standards for the dog. We don't always require that they go to source. You know, if it's inaccessible, we say, oh, that's good enough, and we reward on pooling odor. That's what inaccessible is. It's rewarding the dog on pooling odor. If we were consistent and demanded the dog always got to source, then if we do a blank search with residual odor in it, the dog won't alert because they know it's not source.
Yeah, and I think doing that, because I regularly do blank searches in areas that have either recent or old lingering or residual odor. And I think it really helps clarify things for the dog.
I really do too. But the other thing is, it's not complicated. Like, it's only in nose work that we care. In Barn Hunt level 1, their ORT is 3 tubes. One has odor, rat in it, one has nothing in it, and one has rat bedding odor in it, which is essentially residual rat odor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the dog is expected on day 1 with no training to be able to distinguish that.
Yeah, and we know our dogs know the difference between a hole that's had a rabbit in it versus a hole that currently has a rabbit in it, and all kinds of things in real life, food had been there but is no longer there.
So replace this exercise with primary, right? We have a vehicle search that we're doing blank, and the last class had food in those spots, right? Is that confusing to the dog? No.
They might go, dang it, why am I not getting this?
They're going to they're going to show interest there. Of course they're going to show interest there. But it's just residual. That's all. When I'm out hunting with my dogs and there was a bird planted in an area, he shows interest in that area. And he goes, oh, there was a bird here. And then he moves on and it's not confusing. It's interesting, but it's not confusing. And it's the same with odor for the dog. It doesn't have to be confusing, but we can make it confusing by rewarding the dog or deciding that we feel conflicted inside of ourselves about it. And even if you decide, I'm not conflicted, I'm just going to pay my dog on all residual odor, that's not confusing to the dog. You're going to get frustrated when your dog starts having pooling odor problems, but it's not confusing. You could, as long as you're certain in your own head, it's not confusing. It might cause problems, but it's not confusing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, mostly.
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. Because confusing doesn't mean you're absolved of all problems.
No. I think the dog would understand residual or pooling odor as another thing they get paid on.
Yeah.
And most of us competing in nose work don't want that. You might want that in some other applications. You might want to know about amounts of odor that are so small that it would be essentially the dog's like, there was something here. Mm-hmm. But you don't really want to know. You might want to see interest that there was a bomb there, but you don't want the dog to say there's a bomb here right now when there isn't one, generally.
Yeah. Here's another thing that's worth considering. If you could trial an AKC, you're going to have residual odor in your search area that's just like what you did there, where it's wiped with whatever alcohol. What is it that they wipe with? Vinegar. Yeah. So you're going to have that exact problem in trial. And what do you want your dog to know? Do you want your dog to be confused because sometimes you pay and sometimes you don't? Or do you want it to be clear to the dog that an area that has odor on it that's been wiped with alcohol is not going to pay ever? So the dog can easily make that decision and move on.
And I don't wipe my odor placement.
I don't like that, but at least it gives the dog a clear thing to tell them when it's not going to pay.
Right. The problem is you may sometimes not have that, and you still want the dog to know that it's not going to pay.
I agree. I like my dog not responding to residual or noticing honestly, it but not alerting.
I don't have a problem with it with my dogs at all, and I don't think hardly any of my students have a problem with it. The dog sometimes goes, "Oh yeah, that was there," moves on. Most of the time, not even that. Yeah. Because they understand that difference. But I think one of the hardest things is just communicating that to the handlers in a way that they're not feeling bad about it. And then they can go on with training properly. But if they're feeling guilty or confused, like Michael was saying, then that's a problem. And we know that it's ingrained in people to just reach down and pay for anything and everything.
Even false alerts,
Yeah. And especially when they get it paired with the word alert comes out of their mouth and they reach down with a treat and then they're just,
but the other thing
all the time. So that's another thing where it's just important to help the handlers understand when and why they're pairing. Or when and why they're paying.
And why we do blank searches and why residual is good to work. And here's another thing that's worth saying is that there are some people who just don't line up with your philosophy. There are plenty of people who don't line up with my philosophy of training, and that's totally fine. I'm going to defend my way of training, and they're free to ask me questions and challenge me, and I love them doing that. I'm okay with that. But some of them are just not going to be convinced, and they like another method. That's fine. Know when that's happening, but I think your own confidence in your own method and why you're doing what you're doing, knowing that answers to those questions can sometimes rub off on people and they'll feel more secure. And another thing is, letting them know this is exactly what I do with my dogs, and my dogs do well in competition. So if you think it's going to cause confusion, then how do you explain the way my dogs search, right? My dogs do fairly well and we do this exercise. Why aren't they confused, right?
Yeah. And sometimes, if you can demo those things, that can help. But one thing I found with students who may not, it came from different ways of training. And I want to convince them of things, but I don't want to shove them into that. They have to feel comfortable with it and they have to understand. So I'll just, leave it alone to a large extent, but mention things. And with the students who are on board, coach them to do those things when they forget regularly. And then usually the student will see, that that's working quite well, or that the dogs aren't confused or whatever the issue is. And then they can process through their concerns and then change their handling or not. But I find that helpful to just model the things I think work well, and let people kind of move to that at their own pace.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next question.
Yeah, if you have any follow-up questions to that, make sure to let us know. But yeah, I think that covers the way I feel about that question. So hope that helps. Okay.
And one very other tiny thing. I think the majority of trainers who do blank searches are going to find themselves in that same position, because we do have back-to-back classes, because that's the most efficient thing. And we don't have enormous amounts of space to move every class to a new area. So I think that's very common. Actually,
it's really funny. One of my rants that I was thinking about doing today was going to be about training dirty, which is this exact question. So we'll do a rant about it, but maybe not, because we just answered that question. Maybe not today.
Yeah. And actually, sometimes if I want my classes to all have the same exposure, like I want to work on residual odor, then I'll set odor before my first class and then pick it up and then run the blank search.
Yeah. Or move that hide. I've been doing that with a lot of people who have pooling odor problems, is have them set an odor and then leave it cooking for a minute and then move it before you run the dog.
Yeah.
It's a super important exercise, in my opinion, to clarify things for the dog about what is it that pays. Is it just the molecules floating in the air, or is it the actual source that you're looking for? Okay, so let's look at the next question. By the way, I think this question was from Peg, who posted on our Nosework group about, she posted a Nosework walkthrough and asking how different handlers would handle that search area. I think I want to make a video. We should watch it together, where we watch it, diagram it, and specifically outline exactly how we'd handle that search area given any number of parameters. So,
sure. And we could take, there are a lot of walkthrough videos.
Yeah, we could start making that a series.
Pick a variety.
Yeah, that would be a good series. Because Natalie and I have different strategies. Especially good if
we were actually doing the trials, and then we could compare it to a real.
Yeah,
that we actually did.
Yeah, and then show, did we follow our plan or not? Okay, so
I usually only sort of follow my plans.
Yeah.
Not nearly the way Michael follows his plans, generally.
When you have a large interior or exterior area to search, like what we see at elite level, a cafeteria, for example, how do you plan your search pattern? And what if you let your dog off leash? Then basically you're just following your dog, but you have to remember where you've been and leash them up if they skip something and go back and check it. I've always let my dogs lead the search, but I'm not sure if that's the best for the higher levels. Okay, I want to clear up a couple things right from the get-go. One is that letting your dog off leash is not the same as letting them be independent, right? You're influencing your dog on leash and off leash. You have no way to avoid that, okay? 90% of the time when people believe they're letting their dog lead the search, they don't realize that they're driving the dog around the search the whole time, right? It's kind of like if I chase a horse around a round pen, I'm saying, well, I'm letting him lead. It's like, no, I'm chasing that horse around the round pen, right? We use that in horse training as a punishment, essentially, right? Is I'm going to keep chasing you until you stop. And then the reward is I step back and leave them alone, okay? A lot of people don't realize the same thing happens to a dog when we chase them. So if you look at my patterns and handling video, I give a lot of suggestions about how your body language can pull or push on your dog without you realizing it. I think a truly independent dog is one that doesn't feel any pressure from the handler, which is very rare. I don't think it's possible.
Or the combination of a dog who is less pressure sensitive and a handler who's very careful.
Yeah, if you're very careful, then you can get close to a free search, but you don't get anything truly free.
And I think that not everyone has a dramatic on-leash, off-leash difference either. Some people are able to stay very well connected and together off-leash.
Yeah.
Which is actually when I go off-leash, that's my intention.
Yeah. So I always have, I'll answer and then I'll have you answer because I know you handle it differently than I do. But basically, if I have let's say I have a large interior, let's take the cafeteria example. And I'm going to ignore time limits and how many hides there are, because basically I'm going to handle the same no matter what the time limit is, no matter how many hides I know there are or aren't. I'm going to handle the same. I'm going to stop at the start line. I'm going to relax. Whichever way the door opens, I'm going to go the other way. So I'm going to have the dog on that side. I'm going to let the dog into the room. I'm not going to come into the room. I'm probably not going to let them off leash. If I do let them off leash, that doesn't mean I let them go run around to their heart's content, because especially if there's a lot of odors in there, the dog could just get caught up having fun playing a converging odor problem. And I can simplify that for them by helping them kind of narrow down certain search areas. I'm going to divide that search area up into smaller search areas in my head. Do it like a you can't go back search, right? Which is a great way of helping people understand the concept of structuring your searches.
Yeah, remind me that I have something to say about that.
Okay, I'll try to remember. Good luck.
I can say it now.
I'm definitely going to work from the threshold to the corners of the room. Okay. And that doesn't mean not letting my dog go to the center, but I'm not going to go to the center and let my dog work to the wall. I'm going to go to the wall and let my dog work into the center, because that odor is going to pull into the center and the dog's going to take me in. So I'm going to let them come off that wall to a certain extent. And then I'm going to redirect back to the wall and let them come in and out of the wall all the way around that room. If we have time left over from that, I'm either going to reverse direction or go through the center, depending on how big the search area is. I don't want to go into that
this
center.
Question that it's a quite large space.
Well, even so, it depends on how cluttered it is too. So are there lots of tables? Are there a few tables? Are there clusters of tables? If there are clusters of tables, like we see that every so often, like there are 4 tables here, 4 tables here, 4 tables here, 4 tables here. I'm going to do those 4 tables as a mini search area. Do it like a vehicle. And I'm going to work. I know from training at this point what pace my dog works best in. If they work fast, if they work slow, if I can let them zoom from one area to the other and have confidence that they're not running past an odor, or if I need to help restrain them slightly. And you need to learn your dog to know what they are like as an individual.
Yeah, where they need to be balanced.
Yeah, because Lumi, I'm really confident that if I let her run past an area, she's not going to skip it. She's really dramatic. She's going to have some kind of change of behavior if she's passing an odor that I can respond to and help her work.
And she also doesn't tend to move very quickly when she's searching either.
Well, she can, but yeah. No, she doesn't. But Catfish, he's so young, he's so new, he's fast, he skips a lot. So I need to be a slightly more laid back, restrained, conservative handler for him. And that's what I'm going to do. Even whether it's on or off leash, that's doesn't matter. Okay, I'm gonna do the same pattern. It just means off leash. I don't like to have to nag my dog. Come here, no search. Come here. I don't want to do that. So I might keep them on leash if that's happening. I don't like it for training purposes. I'd let them off leash and work on their own, right? But for a trial, it's not gonna work for me. Go ahead.
Okay, so first the thing about can't go back. So first off, can't go back searches are my absolute favorite at Elite. I think they're the ones I'm the most successful in. I think they're really fun. I enjoy the extra sort of handler strategy of them and time pressure. But at Colorado camp last October, they did a presentation on, I think it was the last day of camp, where they took a large search area. It was maybe like a field space and then a playground space and then a campground space. And they had 3 different Elite handlers work it, and they gave each of them different parameters. So for the first person, it was a can't go back search. So those were their 3 sections. For the next person, it was just one big search. They could do the whole thing, the whole time limit. And then I think maybe for the last person, they told them a range of hides instead of an unknown number of hides or something like that. The person who ran it as a can't go back was by far the most successful. They covered their search area while they were there and then moved on.
Was it only one dog in each group?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We should do this as a bigger study with, a sample size and a blind group or whatever,
Yes, it would be very fun and more statistically interesting to do with a larger number. But I think that, having done these different types of searches, having seen other people do these types of searches, I think it is very indicative of how it tends to work. That if you have the whole area and the whole time, we tend to be inefficient in our movements and just going back and forth and waste a lot of walking time and not be careful. Like, I'm just going to make sure I get around this space instead of assuming I'm going to come back and I can cover the rest of it later. And it was definitely the person who ran it as the Can't Go Back. It was much more the way I would want to get around the space ideally. And she also, like I said, found the most hides and was the most kind of comfortable and confident when she was done, instead of just second guessing herself that, oh, maybe I left something way back there, minutes ago. So I think that's a great strategy when you can do it that way in your own head, even if they didn't tell you it's a Can't Go Back, but you can section things off like that. If I'm not doing it that way, if it's a really big space, I'll often do pretty similar to Michael, where I'll intend to work the perimeter first through all the corners and then sweep through the middle. Sometimes with really complex areas, like more machine shop type spaces, I might work it a little differently. One recent one I remember doing with Hazel, she caught the odor. And if she catches the odor, she gets to take me to the odor, regardless of what I had intended to do. So she caught the odor from the start line, and it was all the way at the back of the space. This was like a 4,000 square foot space. I don't know how she caught the odor from the start line, but she did. So beeline to the back of the room, got that hide, went straight across the back of the room. Because I was like, since I'm back here, let's work the back. She goes straight to another hide. We get that. And then we just start kind of working our way back through the machinery back towards the front. And it ended up those were the only 2 hides. So we worked through the rest of the space. We, kind of over covered an area where she was showing some odor interest. But in retrospect, it was just the first one we found blowing that way. And I felt pretty good about that search because I covered my space and I felt like we had done the best we could in that area. But a lot of times, so it really depends on the kind of search it ends up being. Because if it's just like, say it's a 9 hide search, you're probably going to end up just start getting hide after hide after hide as you go around. And that's kind of going to dictate how you work it quite a bit. But if it ends up being a search that has almost no hides, 0 to 3 maybe, then you're going to have to really be more careful about how you move through the space and not over covering sections and wasting a lot of time. And then another thing I think about is, say it's a 6-minute search. Maybe I need almost all 6 minutes. Maybe I don't. Maybe we get all or almost all the hides. And I'm feeling like we've covered it and we have a minute or 2 left. Do I want to go and recheck areas just in case? Or do I want to save my dog's stamina and my stamina and get out of there? And so if I can run it in a way that I feel like I've been everywhere and covered it, then I can more easily make that decision that I'm done instead of just wandering around. So I think memory stuff is super important in Elite and Summit, and just finding the tricks that work for you to make sure you know where you have and haven't been. And I find it easiest to do that by just covering it in a really logical way, which is usually just around the perimeter and through the middle. But for some people, it may work better to kind of quarter it, where you do a little mini section and another little mini section and move around that way. And again, like I look at every search area individually and also look at the parameters they give me for that search, and then make a bit of a strategy before we start. And then usually change that part way through and do something else, and then go back to my plan. And it, depends on what the reality ends up being. But you do have to be flexible.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so those are 2 answers. They lined up pretty well this time. So now, before I get to some of the questions in the comments, which if you are watching, you just tuned in, say hi, let us know you're watching, and let us know if you have any questions for us, because we don't have as many questions. And I'm going to do a rant real quick that just came in off the top of my head while we were talking, which is natural dog behavior, okay? Because I think there are some funny ideas about letting the dog search freely and what that really means. And we tend to ignore the fact that the way we set hides for the dog shapes the way a dog acts in the future. So one thing I like to point out to my advanced students, if they ever come to a beginning class of mine, is I tell them, watch the beginning dogs. Watch what happens when we let them off leash. Watch what dogs who've never been in this space before, never done nose work before, watch what they do. What do you think dogs who've never been in a space before do? Okay, if you've gone to a dog park and let your dog off leash, we don't like dog parks, but what do they do when you let them off leash? What do dogs do when you go to new areas? They go to the perimeter and they search the perimeter. That's what dogs do. If I have a new boarder come into the house, they're walking the walls. Okay? This running out to the center of a room and spinning around, this is something we've trained them to do. It's not normal. It's not natural behavior. Natural behavior is follow the walls, right? The patterns that I teach my dogs to follow, I'm not teaching it. I'm reacquainting them with the natural pattern canines use.
And
as I
maybe
see it.
some push a little deeper into the corner than you might naturally.
I'm definitely going to shape that natural pattern in directions I like, right? But that's what we've already done by setting hides in the middle. We've shaped the pattern into something else, right? It's going to be shaped. So which direction do you want it to be shaped? Do you want to reinforce the natural pattern they have of going the perimeter and maybe make it a little bit more efficient? Or do you want to change that pattern completely through hide placement, right? And turn it from something orderly to something chaotic. Dogs are very orderly creatures.
And another aside is that we train that start line from the very beginning. And often we're jazzing them up, really excited, and then wanting them to just blast off into the search area. And that's what we want for the first 2-3 months. And then we're annoyed that our dog is missing all of the threshold hides. And so I think that's something we can do as well at the very beginning of nose work. And then reinforce throughout is, already searching from the beginning, a calm start, letting them think and focus, and having hides that are close to where they start instead of, backing them way up so that we can help them get it.
And if there's a little care and attention on training, you can have a dog who's very drivey and charged up who doesn't miss thresholds. You can have both. You can have your cake and eat it too if you know what you're doing. So that's my rant, is really think about it. And this is something I've been wanting to do for a while, which is film like an ORT, an interior vehicle, like an NW1 type search, and have dogs run it who have been training for a year or longer versus dogs who have never been trained in nose work before. Just because I don't think people sometimes recognize the amount of training difference between a year of nose work training and nothing. They think a lot of, maybe not advanced people, but new people in the nose work think it's just a dog sniffing around. My dog can do that. They don't realize there's a whole lot that has changed in a dog through us setting hides and through us building drive and all sorts of things like that. So, and it's also interesting as a reference for us about what do our dogs do naturally without anything else, and what do young puppies do? That's really interesting as well, because vehicles screw it up because dogs have really, really strong ideas about what happens around a vehicle.
Yes.
So anyways, okay, we got a question here from Linda. Do you think there's a difference in the level of success between a puppy that was introduced to odor in their neonatal stage versus an adult dog adopted from a shelter or a rescue?
Or even just a dog
that you got from a breeder but started late. Yeah. So there are a lot of different stages you can introduce odor in, not just the neonatal stage. That's because it's not like adult is the opposite of neonatal. The stages all have different functions. So introducing odor at different ages will have different effects, right? Not based on how old they are, but just what stage of life they're in. So you could even say dogs that start really old would be different than adult dogs too, and not in a bad or a good way. It's just a different way, right? I would say that the stage of life that you introduce odor in is less important than other factors, like the genetics of the dog you're training,
the motivation.
Yeah, because a lot of dogs who have odor imprinted at a young age, they come from lines of people who've been breeding for work ethic for a long time, and they're going to homes of people who are trainers already or who are sport enthusiasts who know what they're doing. Right. Yeah. So we don't know if
all the dogs I know who had odor exposure, and it wasn't that they were intentionally putting them on nose work odors. They were just introducing novel odors a bunch when the puppies were very young, pre-eye opening and everything. But yeah, they all come from,
I think
dog drivey, etc.
So I think that's a big factor, is like, forget about when we introduce odor. If you take a nice dog from nice lines and give it to a good trainer and a good handler, does it matter when you introduce odor? Does it matter if you introduce a young or adult? I don't think it does. I think there's an argument for introducing the odor younger, because then the dog just has a stronger imprinting or longer reward history, and then you can fly through trial levels while they're still only a year old. You're done with your elite title,
which may or may not be a good thing.
Well, and that's happening more and more, and we're going to see it more and more.
And we're going to see what the longer repercussions are of that, because I do think, even with experienced handlers who are maybe better than average at pulling their emotions out of things and keeping pressure off the dog. I still think that trials are a lot of pressure, and elite at year and a half may or may not be the best thing for most dogs. But anyway, that's
but it depends on what we mean by the best thing, because the thing is
maintaining enthusiasm for trial over the
but the fact is there are different people care about different things. Like some people want to trial the dog in the first couple of years of life and then retire it, basically.
Yeah, and if that's your goal, that's fine.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in other dog sports and herding in particular who do like nursery trials, and they get that dog ready for trial really early, and that dog never goes anywhere as an adult. It's very rare, right? But that's
hard because you burn them out.
Yeah, you burn them out. But that's for some people all they want. They want a nice young athletic dog, and they want to handle the crap out of that dog, and then they want to retire it and let it have a nice life doing little farm jobs.
Yeah, but I think people need to be aware of what they're setting up for.
Yeah, there are costs to every choice that you make, right? And know your costs. That's important.
And just anecdotally, I would say I think that dogs who are introduced to odor younger tend to have a little more of a can't think of the word, a visceral gut response to odor. They tend to be the ones that end up foaming at the mouth while working odor. Not 100% of the time, but most of the dogs I know who foam when working started young, were put on odor young, not just on food. So I do think it connects with their brain and their physiology in a little bit different way. Maybe they use the vomeronasal organ more when they were started younger. It's hard to say.
Well, another thing that's worth mentioning is that it's not just about odor and odor recognition. That's not what makes a good nose work dog. There's also hunt drive. Mm-hmm. There's also athleticism. There's also confidence. There's a whole lot of factors. So an adult dog compared to a young dog, well, maybe the adult dog moves slower because he's older, and the young dog is just a faster dog because he's young. Maybe the older dog is more reserved and thoughtful about what he does, and the young dog is sharper and more, focused or less focused, or who knows, right? And gender is going to make a difference in that too. Males and females and dogs have different behavioral traits.
One thing that I tend to notice with older dogs is that they have so much more life experience that they often will pick things up more quickly, depending on how it interacts with their previous learning history, but they tend to problem solve faster because they spent more time sniffing food up on the counters or going under couches or whatever it is. So their initial problem solving tends to be faster than younger dogs, and younger dogs have to make that up in mileage and years. And I've described like my dog's different, mileage before, but Hazel is 8.5, Icy's 4.5. Icy has not caught up to Hazel's level of problem solving because Hazel has twice as much time on her. And so, I'll set the same problem for them. And some of it also is personality and the way they like using their energy and working. But Hazel solves things so much faster most of the time. And Cinnamon, who was not as naturally talented as either of my current dogs in nose work, she, until her death, was still a better problem solver with most hides than Hazel. Just
life experience matters. It really matters, and you can't be discredited. That's not like the shelter dog who didn't have that training in the beginning, wasn't learning anything for the first however many years of his life. He was using his nose to do things that whole time. And sometimes those end up being the best dogs because of that experience.
Yeah, and they, build a good bond with their new owner. If you find a nice sociable dog at a shelter, build that bond with them, find out what really motivates them, use your relationship, social interaction as part of your job together. And, you can have a fantastic dog, as many of you know who have lovely older shelter dogs.
But in general, you give me a dog that doesn't have any strange behavioral issues, I can get it ready to pass an NW1 in 3 to 6 months. Okay. I don't care if it's a 10-year-old rescue dog of an off-breed or a Malinois coming from a breeder. It's going to take me about the same time to get them ready.
You got to spend time exposing them to different kinds of hides, different kinds of environments.
And I can pretty much guarantee they're going to be in the top portion of dogs for the most part. Like, with a good handler, they're going to do well. They're going to do pretty well. I think you're going to have an edge with a young dog And that has nothing to do with when you expose them to odor. Again, I don't think the odor part of nose work is not that important.
It's easy.
It's the easy part. Yeah. It has more to do with the athleticism, confidence, problem-solving ability of that dog, and the hunt drive of that dog. And so that's more important than exposing them to odor. I mean, I know a lot of dogs who've been exposed to odor and are lethargic. They don't care about odor. They won't do it. They're afraid of everything in the world. So that exposure to odor at a young age or an old age didn't make any difference, because that dog just has a whole bundle of problems that basically excludes them from doing well at nose work. Yeah. So if you focus on those things, then the odor is not going to make a difference.
Yeah, and
I know it's really popular right now to expose puppies at a young age. The other thing is, I won't myself take a dog who's been exposed to odor at a young age. I don't want it. I want to expose odor to my dog myself. So if you breed a dog and you've exposed them to odor and they already know what odor is, I'm not going to get your dog. I don't want to buy that dog from that litter.
Yeah, well, I think most of the people who are exposing them, they set something out for the puppies to smell for a minute in the whelping box. It's not like they're putting the dog on odor. It's minor exposures to novel odors. And
again, we don't know if that's making a difference or if it's the fact that the lines of the dogs of people who tend to do that kind of stuff have dogs from good lines, spend more time with the puppies, doing all sorts of things with them. Those dogs cost
Health
more,
checks.
So they go to the better homes, right? We don't know how that unfolds.
Yeah, there haven't been very many years of data on this. Yeah. Not that anyone is even necessarily collecting it well.
We were talking about this a lot lately with puppy culture stuff that's going around, that, without trying to offend people, we don't know what the effect of that is. Do puppy culture dogs come out better? Or is it just because the kind of puppies or owners that do puppy culture are just better breeders in general, right? Yeah, and even if they didn't do puppy culture, those dogs are going to have better success because they're doing the right things. They're spending time with the dogs. They're breeding the right dogs together. And they're looking for the homes of people who are going to raise those dogs properly.
Yeah, well, and that's sort of a branded thing that I think for a number of years, breeders have been doing maybe slightly similar things where they're, just exposing the puppies to things to help them potentially work through certain fears and stuff at a younger age, or get pleasant exposures or whatever the case may be.
It's you can look it up online. It's a brand of puppy
raising,
curriculum. Exposure and enrichment for puppies.
Like what to do week 1, what to do week 2, what to do.
It's a cool program. You should look it up. But I don't think we can make any big assumptions about what that's going to mean for the puppy's development as time goes on. I don't know if we have the statistics for it at this point.
And it may mean different things for different breeds, and different breeds mature at different rates too.
Yeah.
And so some things may be too much for certain dogs at a certain age, but great for other dogs at the same age. So it's hard to say. It's complicated. And also talking about putting puppies on odor, there are certainly arguments to be made about being cautious about when you put a young dog on odor, when it may interact with different, learning or fears that they're going through. But I put all my puppies on odor, except for Cinnamon, who was over a year and a half when we started nose work. But
I think
I haven't worried about it, and I haven't had a problem with it.
I think dogs that are going to have fear issues are going to have fear issues. It doesn't matter when you expose them to odor.
But you will hear a lot of arguments about that from people.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe it's not true. Maybe a dog goes through a fear period, and then you don't expose them to odor, and then they are an older dog now, and they're done with that fear period. You put them on odor, and they're fine. Maybe. I don't know. I tend to find that some dogs are just freaky, and they have a fear period, and the whole life they're dealing with those fear issues.
Yeah.
So.
Or they don't even have anything dramatic, and they're still dealing with fear
all
issues.
Dogs spook. That's normal, right? Like my dogs spook all the time. Sometimes because I'm the one spooking them. I hide behind a corner. Boo! They're like, oh, you spooked me, and then they're over it, right? That's kind of normal. Some dogs hold on to that fear for the rest of their life.
Right. It's the ability to recover that's important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, because Hazel's or Icy rather, she's the kind of a weirdo sometimes. Yeah. She's had weird days where she's just upset by stuff.
Like today.
Like anything and everything.
Someone was shooting a gun, I think, and she was all like on top of us on the couch.
Yeah. But that has not made her dislike odor at all.
No, we could do a nose work search with her while someone's shooting. It wouldn't make any difference.
No.
In fact, if anything, it would make her feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. If there are any other questions, now's your chance to post them. Otherwise, we're pretty much caught up with our questions. Are there any more announcements we have to make? Natalie's going to Pennsylvania camp.
Yeah, I'm leaving on Thursday.
If you're going to be at Pennsylvania camp, make sure to say hi.
Yeah, I think I don't remember who all they are, but I'll know a couple people there.
Yeah.
Let's see. I don't think we know exactly what date NAMA will be next month, but we'll figure that out when we put out the newsletter.
Yeah, the last few months has been kind of crazy.
I think it'll probably be back on the last Wednesday.
Yeah.
This isn't exactly nose related, but we're hosting Roger Brantis in about 2.5 weeks.
So you'll probably get an interview with Roger as well. So if you want to start posting questions for Roger, for those of you who don't know who Roger Brantis is, he's an ethologist from Portugal originally. He lives in Thailand now, and he is amazing. He wrote the Apopo Rats Project, which trained Nambian pouched rats to detect landmines, and then later to detect tuberculosis. And they work those rats, and it's very, very amazing. You can look it up online.
They've cleared thousands of acres of landmines. Amazing.
Yeah. And he used to come tour the world and doing guinea pig camps where he used the same thing, and you're training the guinea pigs to detect gunpowder. And I took it with him several times. We had him out to do canine scent detection.
Yeah, maybe some of you, well, maybe not some of you were there, but some of our students were there. And we had him out for canine scent detection a couple of years later. And I know Aaron came to that. I don't remember if any of the others of you were there. And he's worked with militaries in countries all over the world. Yeah. He used to come out to LA about once a year to work with their detection dogs.
He's mostly known for, you like the shirt, Drink Mo
Bourbon.
Yeah. He's mostly known for his book that most people have on their shelf. It's called Dog Language. It's an encyclopedia of dog behavior. And for being one of the kind of original founders of the positive training movement of trying to train dogs in a gentler way that use psychology and psychological theory rather than
very much about
dominance.
Relationship with the dog and even with
controlling your emotions,
using social contact as part of your reinforcers instead of being overly just a treat dispenser and not a person.
So if you've got technical questions about dog behavior, nose work related or not, we're going to interview him. We'll probably post that to Patreon because we're going to talk about nose work and ethology. It's sure to be a very interesting. He's trains completely differently than how we train. He's starts with a formal alert
for scent detection.
Yeah, so I love training with him anyway.
Our students when he came out.
Yeah, he was very impressed. Yeah.
Which if you have application.
Yeah, if you have questions about that way of training, then those would be good for him as well.
And he is one of the main faculty and original founders of the Ethology Institute, Cambridge, right? Where Michael has
runs it. Yeah, he's the chief.
But was he one of the original founders?
I don't know. I think he may have been the original founder. Okay. I don't know if there were original founders.
Had more people at one point, but Michael's gone through their whole certification program, and he's a tutor with them. And definitely, like Roger's, ethological way of looking at things has heavily influenced our training.
Yes.
So anyway, we're excited about the workshop that he's going to come and do. So I'm sure we'll be talking about that in the interview. That's one of the main, I guess, September things coming up. Aaron asked about California trip. As some of you may have seen, I posted on Facebook, I will be coming to California. I'm going to be dog sitting for a very special dog that I'm going to fly all the way to California for. September 27th through October 11th. So it's 2 weeks. And I'm going to be doing some lessons in a few places. I'm working on getting a mock trial, an NW1 mock trial that I have to do for my CO program on the calendar. I'm hoping that it's going to be the 6th of October, but I'm not 100% sure because I'm waiting to hear back from the potential location, which would be a really fun location if I can get it on a date that works for everybody. So I will be letting you guys know as soon as that is set. I'm going to be up in Apple Valley either once or twice. I'm going to be up at Tehachapi once. And I'm also going to be doing private lessons, mostly around the Pasadena, Sylmar, like that sort of general area, San Fernando Valley area. depending on who it is and what they're interested in. And I'm going to be at Stone Pony Ranch, both of those Mondays, the 30th and the 7th. So I'm going to be doing a variety of things. If you're interested in anything particular, let me know. If you're in private lessons, let me know. I have a fair amount of availability still right now, but I'm nailing stuff down. So, yep. And then we're not sure exactly after that because Michael's spending a whole bunch of weeks back to back doing workshops and COing.
It's ridiculous.
Like 6 weeks back to back. He's gone for the weekends. So
My poor dogs.
yeah. Well, you'll be home for the weeks.
Yeah,
in
but
between.
his hunting training is usually on a weekend. So
Yeah.
poor catfish. Go back to sleep.
You disturbed him.
Yeah, he jerked his head up like, oh my God, it said my name.
Yeah, so we'll see about that. All right. Looks like we are out of questions for tonight.
Yeah. We actually made it to an hour, so not too bad.
Just about. Thanks for bearing with our rather late start. And huge thanks to Wendy for messaging us and reminding us that we're supposed to be having NAMA right now.
Man.
Whoops.
Well, and we recorded an episode of Starting From Scratch this morning. I think it's going to be a really good one.
We went to Tractor Supply and did blind searches.
And I think the next episode of Starting From Scratch will be putting catfish on odor.
Yeah.
So that'll be a whole lesson.
Plan to do that when I get back from Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
All right.
We'll see you guys next time.
Sending in your questions for next time.
Remember that this video is public and you're free to share it with anyone you'd like or anywhere you'd like that you think people would be interested. Get the word out there. The more patrons we have, the more time I can invest in this and put more lessons videos out. And I got quite a bit of my curriculum up, but there's still a lot to go. And I just need the time to do that and equipment and stuff like that. So good.
All right.
See you guys.
Bye.